Long ago, in a land far away, lay the kingdom of Zorath. It was a place cloaked in perpetual twilight, where the sun's warm kiss rarely touched the earth. Tall, twisted trees formed dark forests, and jagged mountains clawed at the ever-gray sky. Zorath was steeped in ancient magic, not the sparkling, good kind, but a deep, shadowy power that hummed beneath the very stones. This land of gloom was ruled by a long line of kings, each one more cold-hearted than the last. Their crowns were heavy with dark secrets, and their thrones were built upon the fear of their people. These rulers, known as the Zorathian kings, held power with an iron fist, caring little for the happiness or well-being of those they governed. Whispers of their cruel deeds and strange ways drifted through the villages like the mist that often hugged the ground. Among these harsh rulers, the first and most fearsome was King Malachur. He was a man consumed by a hunger for power and a deep fear of death. While his people shivered in the perpetual twilight, Malachur spent his days hidden away in his castle's darkest towers, poring over forbidden scrolls and ancient, dusty books. He sought a way to cheat death, to hold onto his throne forever. One cold, silent night, a chilling discovery was made. Deep within a forgotten vault, Malachur found a tattered parchment, glowing faintly with an unnatural light. It spoke of a dark spell, a ritual promising eternal life to the one brave or foolish enough to perform it. The words on the scroll twisted and turned, hinting at unimaginable power and an endless reign, but also at a terrible cost. Malachur, blinded by his desire, saw only the promise. Malachur, eager for unending life, wasted no time. He prepared for the dark ritual, choosing the night of the blood moon, when the sky itself seemed to weep crimson tears. In a hidden courtyard within his castle, far from the prying eyes of his fearful subjects, he drew strange symbols on the ground with a chalk made from crushed bones. Flickering torches cast dancing shadows, making the ancient stones seem to writhe. Terrified animals were brought forth as sacrifices, their cries swallowed by the chilling night air. Malachur began to chant, his voice a low, raspy drone, speaking words no human tongue should ever utter. The air grew thick and heavy, smelling of iron and something far older, far fouler. The blood moon hung like an evil eye above him, watching as the king completed his terrible pact. As Malachur finished the last dreadful word of the chant, a terrible shriek tore through the night, not from an animal, but from the king himself. His skin began to crack and peel, turning a ghastly gray, and his eyes, once cruel, now burned with an unnatural, cold light. His body twisted and changed, becoming taller and thinner, like a shadow stretched too far. The ritual had granted him endless life, but not in the way he had imagined. He was a living husk, a creature of nightmare. The effect spread quickly beyond the castle walls. The air grew colder, biting at the skin. The few plants that still grew withered instantly, their leaves turning black. The ground hardened, becoming like stone, and a thick, unnatural fog rolled across the land, stealing what little light remained. The whispers of the villagers turned to terrified screams as they felt the kingdom itself groan under the weight of Malachur's curse. The darkness that had always been a part of Zorath now became its master, a chilling testament to the king's selfish act. Generations passed, and the tales of Malachur's curse became bedtime stories, fading into legend, though the chilling reality of Zorath's gloom remained. Yet, even in the darkest corners, a flicker of hope sometimes ignites. In a small, forgotten village nestled at the edge of the Deadwood Forest lived a young girl named Ilara. Unlike others who simply accepted Zorath's bleak fate, Ilara possessed a curious spirit and a keen mind. She spent her days exploring crumbling ruins and dusty libraries, seeking answers that no one else dared to look for. One afternoon, while sifting through old scrolls in the oldest part of the village library, she stumbled upon a fragile, ancient parchment. It was unlike anything she had seen, written in a language almost lost to time. Carefully, she began to decipher the strange symbols and faded words. To her astonishment, it was an old prophecy, a forgotten tale about the Zorathian kings and the dark magic that bound them. Alara spent many nights by the dim light of a flickering lamp, piecing together the ancient words of the prophecy. Her heart pounded as the full, chilling truth began to unfold. The parchment revealed that King Malakur's dark ritual was not a one-time event. It was a terrible pact, a chain binding all future Zorathian kings. Each ruler, upon taking the throne, was compelled to perform the very same ritual or face a fate worse than death. The prophecy warned that if a king failed to carry out the dark ceremony, their power would not just fade. A profound, agonizing curse would befall them, twisting their very being and plunging the kingdom into an even deeper, more inescapable gloom. The land would not only suffer, but would actively rebel against the king, ensuring their downfall. This chilling discovery explained why Zorath remained shrouded in such oppressive darkness, generation after generation. The kings were not just cruel by nature. They were slaves to a dreadful, inherited ritual. As Alara continued to read, her eyes widened in horror. The prophecy detailed how each king, driven by fear and the thirst for power, carried out the ritual. But with every passing generation, the sacrifices grew more terrible, the chants more twisted. King Boran, second in line, demanded rare creatures from the shadowed mountains. King Kalen, his son, started using people from neighboring lands, captured in brutal raids. Then came King Valerius, who began sacrificing his own subjects, chosen from the weakest and poorest. Each king, in trying to secure their own dark eternity, pushed the boundaries of cruelty, seeking ever darker ways to please the ancient magic. With every gruesome act, the land itself cried out. The shadows deepened, the wind howled with more sorrow, and the very ground seemed to grow colder, reflecting the coldness in the hearts of its rulers. The constant cycle of these dark rituals had twisted Zorath beyond recognition. What was once merely a shadowy land became a barren wasteland. The soil, once capable of growing sturdy, dark-leaf plants, was now cracked and dusty, unable to sustain even the hardiest weeds. Rivers that once flowed with clear, if cold, water had turned sluggish and thick, their banks choked with black slime. The air itself was heavy, not just with mist, but with a palpable sense of dread, making every breath feel like a burden. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. Only the mournful cry of the wind and the distant, unsettling sound from the king's castle broke the oppressive silence. The trees, gnarled and skeletal, stood like ghostly sentinels, stripped of all life, their branches reaching like desperate fingers toward the sun that rarely pierced the perpetual gloom. This was the true legacy of the Zorathian rulers, a kingdom slowly dying, choked by the very magic that sustained its cruel kings. The more Alara learned about the kings and their rituals, the more determined she became to find a way to break Zorath free from its curse. She tirelessly searched through the dusty library, driven by a flicker of hope that perhaps, somewhere, an answer lay hidden. Finally, after weeks of relentless searching, tucked away beneath a loose floorboard, she found it. A small, leather-bound book, its pages brittle with age. This was not a prophecy, but a guide, an ancient text whispered to be from a time before Malakur. It spoke of a counter-ritual, a way to unravel the dark magic that bound Zorath. But as Alara read on, a cold knot formed in her stomach. The text made it clear. Breaking the curse would demand a sacrifice far greater than any the kings had ever made. It wouldn't be an animal or a stranger. It would require a pure heart, willing to give everything, even their own life, for the land. As Alara grappled with the heavy truth of the required sacrifice, the current ruler, King Theron, was making his own preparations. He was a king cast from the same mold as his ancestors, cold, ambitious, and utterly blind to the suffering of his people. The time for his own dark ritual was fast approaching, as the signs in the sky pointed to the next blood moon. King Theron believed this ceremony was his birthright, the source of his family's unending power. He oversaw the collection of the most exotic and terrified beasts from the furthest corners of Zorath, along with the selection of unfortunate souls from the prisons. He meticulously planned every detail, ensuring the ancient chants were practiced and the symbols perfectly drawn in the castle's hidden courtyard. He thought only of his own prolonged reign, completely unaware of the young girl in a small village who held the key to his family's dark secret and a plan to finally end it. Knowing the danger, Alara understood she couldn't face King Theron and his dark magic alone. The prophecy had shown her the truth, and the ancient text offered a path, but the task was too great for one person. She carefully chose a few villagers, people she knew possessed courage and a deep love for Zorath, despite its bleakness. There was Kale, a strong hunter with eyes that saw far into the shadows, Lyra, a wise elder whose stories kept hope alive, and Finn, a quick-witted young man known for his stealth. Alara shared her incredible discoveries with them, speaking of the king's curse and the possibility of breaking it, along with the great sacrifice required. Fear flickered in their eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a steely resolve. They had all suffered under the cruel kings, and the idea of a free Zorath, a vibrant Zorath, was a powerful dream. Together, they vowed to stop King Theron's ritual, no matter the cost. The night of the blood moon arrived, painting the sky with an eerie crimson glow. This was the night King Theron would perform his ritual, and the night Alara and her friends would make their move. Cloaked in dark, rough-spun garments, they moved like shadows through the twisted landscape towards the king's formidable castle. Finn, with his quiet steps and sharp eyes, led the way, finding hidden paths and dodging the few patrolling guards. Kale, strong and watchful, kept them safe from any sudden dangers, while Lyra's calm presence helped to steady their racing hearts. The castle loomed, a dark, silent giant against the red sky. They found a secret entrance, a forgotten old tunnel known only to a few, and slipped inside. The air within was cold and heavy, thick with the scent of old stone and something else, something dark and alive. Every creak of the castle, every whisper of the wind, felt like a shout in the profound stillness. Their hearts pounded against their ribs, a drumbeat of fear and determination as they moved deeper into the heart of the king's domain. As they crept deeper into the castle's cold stone corridors, the dangers grew. Strange, glowing lines appeared on the floor, humming with an evil energy, magical traps set to incinerate intruders. Lyra, with her ancient knowledge, whispered warnings, helping them navigate around the hidden dangers. Then came the guards, heavily armored and silent as ghosts, their eyes barely visible through their helmets. Kale's strength and quick thinking allowed them to bypass one patrol, while Finn's stealth helped them avoid another by melting into the deep shadows. A chilling shriek echoed from deeper within the castle, a sound that made their blood run cold. It was the beginning of the ritual. Time was running out. Despite the growing fear, the heavy air, and the terrifying obstacles, Alara kept her gaze fixed forward. She remembered the barren lands, the weeping skies, and the suffering of her people. With renewed courage, she pressed on, her friends right behind her, knowing that the fate of Zorath rested on their brave, small shoulders. They burst into the hidden courtyard just as King Theron raised a shimmering dagger, its blade reflecting the blood moon's glow. He stood amidst the swirling dark energy of the ritual, surrounded by terrified sacrifices. "Stop!" Alara's voice, though small, cut through the king's droning chant. King Theron, startled, turned his gaunt face towards the intruders, his eyes narrowed in rage. "Who dares disturb my sacred ceremony?" he roared, his voice laced with dark magic. Alara stepped forward, holding the ancient parchment high. "This sacred ceremony is a curse, King Theron, a curse that has poisoned our land for generations." She then spoke of Malachor, of the true, horrifying fate that befell each king, not endless life, but endless decay. She revealed how his power was merely a slow, agonizing corruption, draining the life from Zorath itself. "You are not powerful, King Theron," Alara declared, her voice ringing with newfound strength. "You are a slave to a dying magic, and the true cost of your power is the very lifeblood of our home." King Theron's face twisted in a snarl, his gaunt features contorting into a mask of pure fury. He raised his hands, and the dark energies of the unfinished ritual swirled around him, lashing out like black serpents. A wave of cold, suffocating magic slammed into Alara and her friends. Cale braced himself, pushing against the unseen force, while Finn darted around, trying to find an opening. Lyra quickly began chanting soft, ancient words of her own, a protective light flickering weakly around them, trying to ward off the king's dark spell. Theron laughed, a dry, rattling sound. He shot dark bolts of energy towards them, forcing them to scatter. The courtyard filled with the eerie glow of conflicting magics, the air crackling with power. Alara knew they couldn't fight Theron head-on. His power, though corrupt, was immense. Their strength lay in understanding the ritual itself. Dodging a streak of dark lightning, Alara knew she had to act quickly. She clutched the ancient text tightly, her eyes scanning its brittle pages. The book held the secrets not just of breaking the curse, but of weakening the dark magic itself. She found a passage describing specific symbols and words that could unravel the king's spell. "Finn, disrupt the outer circle," she shouted, pointing to a shimmering line of energy that caged the sacrificial victims. "Cale, keep his guards away from me." As Finn moved with silent speed to scratch out a part of the glowing symbol on the ground, and Cale engaged the few remaining castle guards, Alara began to chant. Her voice, usually soft, now resonated with a quiet power, speaking words that echoed the ancient text. She drew a counter symbol in the air with her finger, focusing all her will. The dark energy around King Theron flickered like a dying flame. His eyes widened in surprise, and then in dawning horror as he felt his power begin to slip, weakened by Alara's determined counterspell. As Alara's counterspell gained strength, a terrifying change began to ripple through the courtyard. King Theron, who had been a figure of cruel power, now began to tremble. The dark energy that had swirled around him, once a shield and a weapon, started to turn inward, coiling around his gaunt body like a hungry serpent. His skin, already gray and lifeless, began to crack further, and his eyes, which had burned with cold magic, flickered with raw fear. He let out a gurgling cry, no longer a king's roar, but the sound of a trapped animal. The ancient curse, no longer held in check by the completed ritual, was now feeding on its source. The power he had so desperately clung to was unraveling, consuming him from within. The very ground beneath their feet groaned, and the air, thick with dark magic moments before, now felt like a vacuum, sucking the life force from the king. As King Theron's dark power withered and turned on him, a profound shift began to occur outside the castle walls, rippling across the entire land of Zorath. The heavy, oppressive air began to lighten, and the thick, unnatural fog that had clung to the ground for centuries started to dissipate, revealing glimpses of a pale, hopeful sky. The barren soil, which had been hard as rock, softened slightly, and a faint, almost imperceptible green shimmer appeared on its surface. The sluggish, black rivers seemed to stir, their waters clearing, and a gentle breeze, not the usual mournful howl, whispered through the skeletal trees. It was a slow, tender awakening, like a land shaking off a long, terrible sleep. The dark magic that had suffocated Zorath for so long was fading, leaving behind a fragile promise of healing and renewal. With King Theron consumed by the very darkness he had sought to wield, Alara knew their work in the castle was done. The terrifying screams of the king echoed through the courtyard for a moment longer, then faded into a chilling silence. The air, though still heavy, no longer pulsed with the malevolent energy of the ritual. The sacrificial victims, freed from their magical binds, looked up with wide, bewildered eyes, slowly realizing their escape. "We must go," Alara urged her friends, her voice still trembling slightly from the ordeal. They had risked everything, and now it was time to leave the crumbling symbol of the king's power. Kale quickly helped the freed prisoners, guiding them to safety. Finn led the way back through the secret tunnel, his stealth as sure as ever. They left King Theron to the terrible fate he had brought upon himself, a prisoner of the curse he had inherited and embraced. Their mission inside the castle was complete, and as they slipped back into the night, they carried with them the fragile hope of a new dawn for Zorath. The next morning, something truly wondrous happened. For the first time in generations, the heavy, dark clouds that had always covered Zorath began to part. A golden light, soft and warm, streamed through the gaps, touching the barren earth. It was the sun, a sight many had only heard about in old tales. Its gentle rays brought a sense of warmth and peace that had been absent for centuries. The villagers, cautiously emerging from their homes, looked up in awe. Tears streamed down their faces as they felt the sun's touch on their skin. The air smelled fresh and clean, no longer heavy with dread. A faint, almost musical hum seemed to rise from the very ground, a song of life returning. The few withered plants that remained stretched towards the light, and a tiny, brave green shoot pushed its way through a crack in the dry soil. Hope, a feeling long forgotten, blossomed in the hearts of the people of Zorath. Alara, the quiet village girl who had dared to seek answers, was now hailed as the savior of Zorath. The people, their hearts filled with newfound hope, looked to her for guidance. She did not seek a crown or a throne, but instead worked tirelessly with Kale, Lyra, and Finn to rebuild their broken land. Under her gentle but firm leadership, the ancient texts were studied not for dark magic, but for wisdom. The barren fields were tended with care, and the rivers were cleaned. Slowly, painstakingly, Zorath began to bloom again. The sun continued to shine, warming the soil and coaxing life back into the land. Alara taught her people that true power came not from dark rituals and fear, but from unity, courage, and a love for their home. Zorath, once a land of shadows and cruel kings, entered a new era of peace and light, guided by the young girl who dared to challenge